What's up guys, welcome to the inaugural video on this YouTube channel of mine. There's no better way to start than start off with a bang, because in today's video I'm going to be talking about how I was able to land my dream job at Goldman Sachs, and not just any Goldman Sachs but Goldman Sachs's New York headquarters. Now you might be wondering as to why I'm relating this story of mine. I am not relating the story to blow my own trumpet, or in Hindi as they say, apne muh mein mittu banna. I am not saying this to jerk myself off, because trust me, there are lots of other people who do that for me. But the reason as to why, or some of the reasons as to why I am relating this story, is because I've had conversations in the recent past with so many students and young professionals from all over the fucking world, and the first question that they ask me is, how were you able to do it? Secondly, I want to give you guys a sense of what it takes to break into some of the most ultra competitive, highly sought after investment banking and finance roles all across the world, especially when the odds are heavily stacked against you, as was the case with me. And the reason I say that the odds were heavily stacked against me is because, number one, I went to Georgia Tech, and during my time in college, Georgia Tech was a non-target school. That is, investment banks did not come to Georgia Tech's campus to hire, especially hire for front office positions. Secondly, I was an engineer in college and not a finance major. Thirdly, I was an international student, and typically banks do not like hiring international students because of all the fucking paperwork that the process entails. It just complicates matters a lot for the bank. Plus, banks have to sponsor international students and the visas as well. And lastly, I wasn't just gunning for any fucking finance role. I was gunning for some of the most coveted, top-notch front office roles at the Goldman Sachs and the JP Morgans and the Morgan Stanleys of the world. So I knew that I had my task cut out and the odds were heavily stacked against me, but I was still able to break in, and I'm going to relate my story to you, which will make it crystal clear to you as to what some of the steps were and best practices were that I undertook, which helped me achieve what back then was my dream. Another reason as to why I want to relate this story is because, plain and simply, it's a great fucking story. I never get tired of relating it. Lots of investment banking aspirants find my story extremely inspiring. So hopefully, at the end of this video, you feel somewhat charged up and galvanized. And the last reason being the fact that I honestly feel a bit sorry for you guys, because you guys have been torturing yourself watching videos that are produced by this gentleman named Afzal Hussain, who creates lots of these videos on finance and investment banking. And honestly, his style is just so fucking drab. There aren't too many alternatives or substitutes out there in the market, so you guys probably have to just like make do with whatever is presented to you in the form of Afzal Hussain videos. But those videos are so fucking drab. Trust me, I am not saying this just for the sake of saying this, but whenever I suffer from insomnia, whenever I can't really sleep at night, I just start watching a few minutes of Afzal Hussain's videos, and within 2 minutes I am fucking in deep sleep or deep slumber. Anyway, let's kick things off with my story. Just one quick announcement before I get going. Everything that I'm going to be talking about in this video has been described comprehensively, in detail, articulately in my ebook as well, which you can see on your screen right now. Definitely check out the link that you see in the corner, which gives you more details about what my ebook is about. And trust me, if you are an investment banking or finance aspirant, you will find so much fucking value in this ebook. But stay on until the end of this video, because towards the end, once I'm done relating my story, I will be describing the ebook in further detail and everything that you can expect from the ebook. So if you want more details about the ebook, then make sure to watch this video until the very end. So let's kick things off. So I'll start by rewinding, by turning back the clock to July 2014. This was when I spent a very beautiful summer in New York City, and I was interning with PwC. I was doing a consulting internship with PwC. Now, why was I doing a consulting internship with PwC? Because, when you're absolutely fucking clueless about what you want to do in life, you just end up doing consulting, because it provides a very diverse exposure and broad exposure to a broad set of industries and problems, whatever that may mean. So I was interning with PwC in New York City, and this was the fag end of the summer. So the fag end of the internship, I was at PhD. And PhD is a very popular rooftop lounge in New York, and I was absolutely drunk out of my fucking mind, because that's exactly what the ritual was every single Friday and every single Saturday. And when I'm typically intoxicated, at least that's what the case was back in the day when I used to drink. I've been sober now for quite some time. I feel like smoking a lot, and so I meandered my way through the playboys and the many scantily clad women who were present in the indoor section, and went to the outdoor patio where a lot of people can smoke, where people are just chilling and vibing. And I came across this group of 3 Aussie dudes, and I walked up to them and asked one of them if I could bum a cigarette off of them. the person I asked did oblige, and I ended up having a conversation with those guys. That was my rule. If I borrow a cigarette from you, I'll repay you by striking a conversation with you that you are bound to enjoy, given how good a conversationalist I am. Anyway, I got talking to them. We took turns answering the "so what do you do" question, and each one of us gave our job descriptions as self-descriptions, as is customary in a place like New York, especially if you have a very enviable job description in New York City. We spoke about what we do, and I told them that, look, I'm just about to conclude my consulting internship in New York with PwC, and they introduced themselves as well, and I learned that all three of them were in New York City from Australia, and they were in New York to be a part of Goldman's new hire orientation. They had just been inducted into Goldman's latest class of investment bankers. Back then, when I was speaking with them, I honestly didn't know too much about Goldman Sachs or investment banking, but whatever they were telling me sounded very, very sexy to me. And upon telling them that I'm interning with PwC as a consultant, one of them, in very classic Aussie fashion, flung a jibe at me saying consultants are investment banking rejects, which means that if you're unsuccessful in landing an investment banking internship or an investment banking full-time job, then you settle for consulting. So consulting is always plan B, investment banking is plan A, and if you fail at plan A, that's when you have to settle for plan B. And look, back then I wasn't very well versed with consulting, with investment banking, so I didn't quite understand exactly what he implied, but it certainly left a bad taste in my mouth, although he may have said that in jest. I had a couple of weeks left until the end of my internship, and I honestly spent the last 2 weeks of the internship simply researching what investment banking is, what investment banking entails, understanding the basics and the fundamentals of the investment banking profession. And I also did a fair bit of research in understanding the difference between consulting and investment banking. And to be completely honest, everything that I read, everything that I learned about investment banking seemed very, very sexy and glamorous to me. But look, these were only the basics that I was learning about, right? So I didn't want to get carried away. During my last week, so this is quite literally, I think, the penultimate day of my internship, I was called into the office of Scott Dillman, who was the senior partner of the group to which I belonged during my internship. Scott had called me to his office to extend a full-time offer to me, which I was really happy about, but I was not too surprised, only because I knew that my performance throughout the fucking internship had been stellar. But what surprised me is that he gave me a book called Flash Boys by Michael Lewis, and he gave that to me as a token of appreciation for all my contributions to the group that summer. And while I was really happy that he gifted me this beautiful book with a bright red cover, I was fairly clueless about why he had picked this book. But seeing that I was fairly clueless, Scott used the book as a cue to reminisce about the 20 plus years that he had spent on Wall Street working as a trader. Honestly, that 1 hour that I spent in Scott's office on my penultimate day was probably the most interesting hour that I'd spent at the PwC office all fucking summer. And ironically, what was meant to be an exit interview to persuade me to actually take up PwC's consulting offer ended up dissuading me from consulting and encouraged me to actually look up and do more research on investment banking, because everything that I was learning about finance, about the financial services industry, about investment banking was seeming fucking fascinating to me. I had 2 more weeks left between the end of that internship and the start of the following semester in college, the fall of 2014 semester, and I'd gone back to India during those 2 weeks at the end of my internship with the full-time offer in hand and Flash Boys that Scott had gifted me. And as soon as I landed in India, I just finished Flash Boys in no time, and I was literally spending a majority of my waking hours when I was in India during those 2 weeks before going back to college for the fall semester just reading the Wall Street Journal, devouring every fucking page of the Wall Street Journal. As soon as I reached college, I knew that, you know what, I had given rise to this newfound interest in finance, but I wasn't quite sure if this was just infatuation, if this was true love. So I was like, you know what, let me explore this newfound love in further detail. So I ended up taking quite a few classes in finance during the fall semester. So these were extra classes that I was taking on top of the engineering curriculum that I already had, because remember, I was an engineer in college, I was not a finance major. And so taking these extra classes also meant that now, instead of graduating in May 2015, I was scheduled to graduate in December 2015, which means a semester late. And what that ended up doing is that it opened up a new summer for me. It opened up another summer for me. So I knew that I would have another summer to intern somewhere. And I did tell PwC about this, that you know what, I won't be able to come back to PwC full time because I have another summer internship. And what PwC told me was, okay, no problem, you can come back to us for another summer internship during the summer of 2015, exactly 1 year after I finished my summer 2014 internship with PwC. And that's when I thought that who the fuck wants to go back to PwC? I've already done a consulting internship, I worked at PwC, why replicate the same experience? Why not try something new? Why not try a fresh challenge? And that's when I thought that, look, you know what, I'm enjoying everything that I'm learning about finance, the fundamentals of finance, the concepts of finance, everything that I'm learning about investment banking. Why not perhaps give a finance internship a shot during the summer of 2015 before graduating? Because if I truly enjoy working in finance, that will confirm that it's true love that I have and true passion that I have for finance, and not just infatuation. Because you can read the theoretical aspects of something, but unless you actually get solid fucking practical experience in that particular field, you can never tell if it's a field that you're truly passionate about, if it's a field that you'll truly enjoy. And to be completely honest, another minor factor that definitely played a role in helping me decide as to whether I want to go back to PwC and do another consulting internship with them during the summer of 2015, or if I should perhaps ply my trade on Wall Street and look for a finance internship, is that the words of those fucking Aussies kept coming back to me. I kept hearing those words, consultants are investment banking rejects, in my head all the fucking time. And I was like, you know what, I have a fucking chip on my shoulder and I will end up getting this investment banking or this finance internship. But of course, that was the minor reason. The primary reason being the fact that I was truly captivated by everything that I learned about finance, about the financial markets, through both self-study as well as some of the courses that I had taken in college. But this was definitely the riskier choice. You know, I had an offer in the bag from PwC, so I could have chosen to accept PwC's offer and just, you know, sit back and relax my entire senior year in college, chill the fuck out, drink, party, smoke up, do whatever the fuck I wanted to do, as most people do during the senior year. But I was like, you know what, Anubhav, you have to sacrifice all the fun and games. Pick the riskier choice, as I typically do in my life on most occasions. Pick the riskier choice because, as they say, higher the fucking risk, higher the fucking reward. And I knew that, you know what, if I can somehow land a gig on Wall Street working at some of these elite investment banks, it's going to be so much more thrilling, so much more enjoyable than doing a boring fucking internship or boring fucking consulting job. Being cognizant of the fact that this was the riskier choice, I knew that I had my task absolutely cut out, and that I could leave absolutely no stone unturned in my preparation to maximize my chances of breaking into Wall Street. And I called it the riskier choice, but honestly, riskier choice is also a fucking understatement, because I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the stat, it's actually harder to break into a Goldman Sachs or a JP Morgan or any top-notch bulge bracket investment bank than it is to break into Harvard University. Harvard has an acceptance rate of about 5.5%, whereas some of these mighty bulge bracket investment banks have acceptance rates of only about 3.5%. And so now, instead of actually spending my free time in college either being drunk or high, which was the case during my first 3.5 years in college, I started devoting all my free time, including Friday nights, as sad as that may sound, including Saturdays, including Sundays, just devouring finance guidebook after finance guidebook, just so that, you know, I was very well prepared in terms of not just behavioral questions, but also in terms of technical questions. I also joined the investments committee on Georgia Tech's campus, which is Georgia Tech's finance society, simply put, but it's the nation's largest student-run endowment fund. And that experience in the investments committee taught me so fucking much about the fundamentals of finance, about the fundamentals of value investing, about companies and the business models in general. Plus, what it did for me, more importantly, is that it actually exposed me to a group of like-minded people who helped me a lot in my bid to land what would end up being my dream finance role. I also made sure that I embellished my resume, my CV, such that it jumped off the page. It was very fucking impressive, and I tailored it in such a way that anyone looking at it would be mightily impressed by my resume. I started sending out cold emails relentlessly to bankers, to traders, hoping that they would respond to me. Not everyone responded. Of course, most of them, in fact, did not respond to me, but I never lost hope. And the few of them who actually did respond, I made sure to set up informational interviews with them and did so many fucking informational interviews. On top of that, not to mention the fact that I had to make sure that I kept my grades and my GPA high as well, because GPA is a very important factor that investment banks look for when they're hiring the best of candidates from all across the world. All of these efforts did pay off when I ended up getting a couple of offers. So the first offer was from Deutsche Bank's Global Markets Division, or the Sales and Trading Division, for their Jacksonville, Florida office. And the second offer that I ended up getting was from this boutique investment bank based in Atlanta. It's actually a middle market investment bank based in Atlanta called Childs Advisory Partners. That's what the former name was. It's now called Bowstring Advisors, and I was super fucking happy. I wasn't quite sure about which one I wanted to pick because I wasn't quite sure about whether I wanted to do investment banking or sales and trading. Both of them really intrigued me, and I wasn't quite sure if I wanted the boutique experience working at a smaller place or if I wanted to work at a behemoth, a bulge bracket bank. But because of Deutsche's brand name, I gravitated towards Deutsche, ended up picking Deutsche over Childs Advisory Partners. I did really fucking well during the internship. I knocked it out of the park, and at the end of the internship, Deutsche gave me a full-time offer to come back to them. So I went back to college after the summer of 2015 for my final semester in college. My final semester from August 2015 until my graduation in December 2015. And although I was really happy that I did end up getting this full-time offer from Deutsche Bank, to be completely honest, I was not too keen on starting my career in Jacksonville, Florida. A lot of people who are close to retirement, a lot of people who've actually spent the first 15-20 years of their working life in New York move to Jacksonville, Florida because they want a calmer life. You know, that's where they want the family to grow up. But in my early 20s and being very, very fucking ambitious, there was no way I wanted to start my career out in Jacksonville, Florida. And so when I came back to college, despite having this full-time offer from Deutsche Bank, I was like, you know what, I'm still going to be gunning for full-time roles in New York City, which is the epicenter of finance. And I wanted to use my Deutsche offer as leverage to break into some of the best banks in New York City. And so I came back, I started aggressively reaching out to banks in New York City. I came very close on a couple of different occasions when I thought I had aced my super days or my final round interviews with Citi and UBS, but neither of them ended up giving me a full-time offer. In hindsight, you know, it was their fucking loss, not my loss. Anyway, fuck Citi, fuck UBS. So time was running out, as I didn't have too long a window to decide as to whether I wanted to take up Deutsche's offer or not. I did not end up getting any other offer, and so I really had to accept Deutsche's offer. But I knew at the back of my mind that if I did end up getting an offer that was significantly more lucrative than Deutsche's offer was, I would end up reneging on Deutsche's offer for that significantly more lucrative offer. And so I ended up continuing the pursuit to get a full-time offer in New York City. The next few months would be an even bigger roller coaster. I reached out to this Georgia Tech alumnus who was working on Goldman's trading floor, and I quite literally begged him to consider me for full-time opportunities. He mentioned to me that his group wasn't quite hiring anyone on a full-time basis, but he could consider me for a 1-month winter internship, or something that Goldman calls a winternship. And this would be from mid-February of 2016 until mid-March 2016. And I was extremely ecstatic, and I was like, you know what, I'm happy to come to New York and interview for this position. So quite literally within like the next day or two, I booked my tickets to New York, ended up at Goldman's headquarters interviewing for this month-long winter internship position. I knocked all the fucking interviews out of the park, finished my super day with Goldman, and then flew back to Atlanta with the fucking internship offer in my hand. I did not tell anyone at Goldman during my interviews that I already had an offer from Deutsche in the bag, and there was no reason for them to know as well, only because my Deutsche full-time role wasn't quite starting until April of 2016, which would be about 15 days after the end of my internship, which was scheduled to end mid of March. So I graduated in December 2015, and about 1.5 months later, in mid-February of 2016, is when I started my internship on Goldman's trading floor. On my first fucking day on Goldman's trading floor, I was told that I should not expect any full-time offer on the back of this internship, only because all full-time positions had already been closed. Now that disclosure did not dampen my spirits, because I knew that if I actually made a good impression during this 1 month that I had, then they would definitely consider me for opportunities that would open up in the future. So during those 4 fucking weeks, I went all out. I gave it my 200% every single day, working as hard as I could, putting in the hard yards day in and day out, and networking with as many people, not just on Goldman's trading floor, but even in other divisions, just so that, you know, I could make a mark on that place, and in the future they would perhaps call me if I did leave a memorable impression upon Goldman. And in hindsight, that did happen, but I'll come to that in a bit. So I began life with Deutsche in Jacksonville, Florida. And trust me, I was actually enjoying my work with Deutsche. It was the same team that I was working with, that I'd worked with during my internship with Deutsche. And so that rapport, that bonding was already there. I was actually thriving, but at the same time, I was hoping that Goldman would come calling and ask me if I wanted to join them full-time. And lo and behold, about a couple of months into the start of my full-time role with Deutsche, Goldman came calling and asked me if I wanted to come over to New York for a super day with them. I was thoroughly fucking excited, but I was nervous as well, only because I had this hurdle of a super day to cross. So I went to New York, had my super day. I had about fucking 12 or 13 interviews back to back to back to back to back. It was nearly 6 hours, I think, that I spent at Goldman's headquarters, but I knocked every single fucking interview out of the park and came back to Jacksonville. And within a couple of days or 3 days of coming back to Jacksonville, Deutsche called up saying, "Hey Anubhav, you have a full-time offer to work on Goldman Sachs' trading floor." I had fucking done it. I was absolutely ecstatic, I finished my Deutsche gig on a Friday, flew over to New York that very weekend to start with Goldman Sachs on Monday. I had fucking done it. While I was on the flight from Jacksonville to New York, I was just reminiscing about how crazy a roller coaster these last 2 years had been. From that conversation that I'd had with those Aussie lads during the summer of 2014, and the conversation that I had with Scott Dillman, the PwC partner, to July of 2016, landing a fucking full-time offer from Goldman Sachs and breaking into my dream role. It had been really fucking grueling, but the results were equally satisfying. I would go on to spend 2 wonderfully remarkable and rewarding years at Goldman Sachs' New York headquarters, both across the sales and trading as well as the investment banking divisions. After having spent 2 years at Goldman, I actually decided to come back to my home country in India and pivot to a new space, and my ebook provides further details on why I chose to pivot to a completely different line. I'm actually working as a presenter now in the sports media field, and my ebook gives more details as to the reasoning that prompted me to make this switch. Hope you actually enjoyed my story. Hope it inspired and galvanized you somewhat. That was the objective of this video. Hope you now understand that, regardless of how heavily the odds may be stacked against you, there is still a way out. There is still light at the end of the tunnel, for lack of a better cliche. Definitely check out this ebook. Trust me when I say this, my ebook will answer every single fucking question that you may have about the process. Everything from start to finish, from asking yourself if you're doubly sure that investment banking is what you want to do, to landing your dream investment banking offer. It talks about everything, literally the A to Z, from start to finish. You might feel that, it's a $25 investment. I'll give you a discount firstly, but even then you might feel like, it's a tad expensive. Dude, trust me, you spend $25 fucking dollars on a fucking meal, and when it comes to buying a book that has the potential to change your life, you're like, let me be a bit more frugal. I can't afford to shell out $25 fucking dollars. Think of these $25 that you'll be spending not as a cost, but as an investment which has the potential to change your fucking life. And trust me, if you do not feel that this book has paid dividends for you, then reach out to me personally and I will help you out in any way. But I am so confident that every single person, regardless of what that person's background is, regardless of what that person's educational qualifications are, regardless of how heavily the odds might be stacked against that person, you will definitely benefit from reading this book. You can also sign up for a counseling session. The counseling session, of course, is more expensive because I'm providing one-on-one guidance to you. Even though I could be earning more money through the counseling session, I will tell you that instead of actually signing up for a counseling session, just buy the book first. See if the book answers all your questions. If it doesn't, please reach out to me and I will be more than happy to answer whatever questions that you may have. I will make it clear that I haven't minced my words in this video and I haven't minced my words in the ebook as well. It definitely wasn't smooth sailing, as you could perhaps decipher and surmise based on my story. But what I will say on a very cautiously optimistic note is that if I could do it given my circumstances, so can you. So thank you so much for patiently hearing my story, learning more about the ebook. Definitely subscribe to my channel. I have a lot in store for you guys. You might actually recognize me from this old channel of mine, but let me make this very clear that I've actually shifted all my activity to this new channel. The strategy that I had on my old channel was sort of haywire and I was all over the place. I have a much more clear strategy for this channel and I'm starting out from scratch, but I'm definitely confident that I will grow and it won't take too long for me to actually surpass Afzal Hussain in terms of the engagement and the subscribers that I have on this channel, because I will be bringing to you information that's extremely valuable. I'll be talking about my experience as an international student, as an engineer at Georgia Tech, how I was able to go from engineering at Georgia Tech to investment banking at Goldman Sachs, how I went from investment banking at Goldman Sachs to working in the sports media line and working as a Cricket World Cup presenter during the 2019 Cricket World Cup, and this was with ESPN. So I've had quite a diverse set of experiences and I definitely want to share all these experiences with you. I love talking about personal development as well, about fitness. I also love talking about professional development, some of the tricks of the trade that I have been able to use to land so many roles at so many different kinds of companies: PwC, Cisco, Goldman Sachs, ESPN, and many other companies. The other aspect that I have in mind for this channel is podcasts. Now, podcasts have been gaining a lot of traction, not just in the western part of the world, but in the east as well, especially in India. And a lot of what I've learned in my life has actually come from the success stories of others, replicating or emulating others who've been there, done that, others who are best in class in their respective fields. And I've actually shot quite a few of these podcast episodes recently with the likes of Murli Karthik, Anju Bobby George, Peter Drury, Jersey Gregorick, Ed Latimore. I'm pretty sure you are familiar with some of these names, and I have quite a few episodes lined up with others as well, and I've learned a ton from them, and I've absolutely no doubt that you learn a lot as well from these very organic conversational one-on-one discussions that I'm having with some of these people who are the best in the business. Appreciate all your time and your patience watching this video. Hopefully it was worth the time that you spent. Subscribe to my channel and do not forget to check out my ebook. Trust me when I say this, it's worth repeating. I know I've said this multiple times, but it's worth reiterating. This ebook, or the $25 or the $20 that you spend on this ebook, has the power to potentially change your life. Anyway, I'll conclude on this note. Have a good one. Cheers.